Welcome back to Fine Art Diary. Today we'll see how to paint stream water and rocks step by step. This is the canvas I'm going to use today, and this is my today's color palette. So let's get started. So first of all, I am planning to give a wash of greens and browns to all over the surface, just to get rid of the bright white color of the canvas and also to unify everything. This particular layer can be very thin because later on I am going to paint all over the surface once again. In the right hand side I am using more brown because I am planning to paint some rocks in that area. So from the beginning I am going to get the hue of the rocks in that area. Alright, I let it dry for 10 minutes and now let's start doing the blocking of the rocks. For that I am mixing raw sienna, deep magenta, and let's start with some very loose strokes. Adding some more magenta, ultramarine blue, and sap green, just to make it a little bit more darker. In this stage, the brush strokes can be very loose and we should not be worried about smaller detailing. You can see I'm just giving the hints of the placement of the rocks. Extending the block in for some foreground foliage, and you can see I'm using the same color variation, the browns and the greens, but the value is a little bit darker. Now moving towards the back, and you can see I'm looking at the painting as a whole object and not individual shapes right now. And this is what we can do at the very beginning of the painting. For the water surface I am going to mix the greens because the entire water surface is going to get the reflection of the trees, so the base of it is going to be more greener. That's alright, now let's add some vibrant midtones for the visible rocks and soil, and for that I am mixing the red, yellow and titanium white. That's alright, now let's mix crimson lake, yellow ochre and titanium white. I'm actually mixing the mid-tone and going to do the blocking of some smaller shapes of the rocks. This can be done with some very casual, spontaneous brush strokes. For the foliage also I am going to do the same. So giving some hints of the mid-tone greens here and there. For this I have mixed viridian green and yellow ochre, also adding the mid-tone to the water surface. If you look at the rocks carefully, you will discover there are many colors and it is very much harmonious. So that is the reason I am using gray on the top of brown, and then I am mixing a little more blue to it to make it more cooler, and it is going to look harmonious. Now it's time to add some darks to the rocks, and for that I am mixing ultramarine blue, viridian, crimson lake, yellow ochre and a touch of titanium white. Now I am slowing down my brush strokes and will define some bigger rocks. You can notice over here, by the darks I am also defining the planes of the rocks, and later on it is going to help me to add the volume to the individual objects. That's alright, now I need to find some lighter planes of the rocks, and for that I am using crimson lake, yellow ochre and titanium white, also mixing a touch of cobalt blue. Because in this particular scene there is no direct key light and the bounce light of the sky is acting as the key light, which is cool, and that is the reason I am mixing cobalt blue into the mixture. You can see I am breaking the bigger planes into smaller planes, and in between I am leaving some detailing as the negative shapes. I have been visiting this place since a long, and I did several outdoor studies sitting in this area. And a few days back when I visited the place once again, somehow something was very appealing in this area. I was thinking like everything is modernized, but this particular area of this place is still carrying the same vibration what I used to get few years back, still carrying the natural beauty. And on the spot I decided to paint this place. So I took several photographs of that place. Then in my studio I arranged it and did this composition. Also giving some suggestion of the rocks and soil in the background, and that should not be very precise. That's alright. Now it's time to add the darkest dark, and for that I am adding viridian and crimson lake. The viridian and crimson lake can create beautiful darks for the landscapes, and very often we can use this mixture. Now I am going to define the intermediate planes. So with the same mixture, I am adding crimson lake and yellow ochre. And it is a kind of mid-value but towards the dark. Also, it is quite warm because when the planes are turning out of the cool key light, it is going to appear much more warmer than the actual hue of it. Now you can see the rock started getting its volume, also giving the hints of some stones inside the water. That's alright, but as I discussed, our key light is the bounce light of the sky, so I think the top lens can have a little more cool color on it. So I have mixed a cooler gray and trying to make it a little more harmonious and cooler. Still, we don't have to be very precise and just assuming the top planes and applying the color. Now let's mix a warm midtone for the underwater soil and rocks because it is in the shadow and not getting enough bounce light of the sky. So the blocking of the rocks is complete. Now I will come back later on with the highlights. Now let's do the blocking of the reflections on the water surface. And for this I am using sap green, yellow ochre and titanium white. Starting with this bush because the reflection is going to come on the water surface. There will be the reflection of it. Also making a darker mixture by using sap green, burnt sienna and crimson lake and painting around it to increase the contrast of the light and shade. So exaggerating the darks of the water surface. That's fine. Now going back to the dark mixture of viridian and crimson lake. And this time I am adding the shadow shapes of the foliage. Now it's time to paint the branches of the trees, and for this I am mixing viridian, yellow ochre and previously mixed titanium white. For this I am using a filbert brush to create the texture of the leaves. We also can change the hue of it, somewhere a little more viridian and somewhere a little more yellow ochre, so that it will look little different and harmonious. You also can see I made the color a little more gray so that we'll have the variation in the saturation also. This time a little more yellow to make it a little more chromatic. You can see with the help of filbert brush I'm getting a beautiful leafy texture over there. I have changed my brush to a smaller brush just to show a different variation of the leaves. This side also I am going to do the same. You can see I am using a bigger brush than the previous one so that the texture can be a little bigger and can create the perspective. Now let's add some dirty leaves towards the soil. And you can see in this case I am adding some brown color to it. Switching to my rigger brush and giving the impression of some branches. Now we need to add the reflection of the foliage on the water surface. And for that I am using Viridian, Cad Yellow Medium, Yellow Ochre and Titanium White. Similarly, this side also we have to do the same, and in this case I have added only Viridian and Cad Yellow Medium. I am glazing in this area so that some of the rocks will look like inside the water. Now it's time to add the sky reflection on the water surface, which will make the water surface more believable. And for this I am using Titanium White and both the blues in it. It's a kind of dry brush approach and I'm using a round bristle brush for it. Gently I am touching the teeth of the canvas to get the texture of it, and it is going to create the illusion of the reflection on the ripples. Basically, the reflection is seen through the ripples. So, while drawing these reflections, we need to maintain certain directions. So, wherever the obstacle is there, we should paint around it, because definitely around it the ripples will be created. And in some other areas, we need to give the direction of the ripples. While painting, I am keeping these two factors in my mind. Now let's simplify some of the areas with a flat brush. Switching to my rigger brush to add some very smaller detailing in the reflection. Now giving the hints of the path of the stream towards the back. Now it's time to add the lightest light to the tree branches, and for this I am using Viridian, Cad Yellow Medium and Titanium White. We should not overdo it, but just giving the suggestion here and there. Now you can see we are getting the depth of the trees. From the beginning I am maintaining one thing, to add different hues to different trees, and still I am maintaining the same. Now some touches of the highlights on the stones. In this I am giving the brush strokes very precisely and trying to assume the planes which are facing towards the light. That's alright. Now let's add some tiny highlights at the adjoining areas of the water surface and the rocks. That's alright, now let's add some tiny birds over here. Alright, I'm done for the day and here are some details of the painting. Hope you enjoyed today's session. If you are having any suggestion, you can write down in the comment box. And don't forget to subscribe the channel because many more painting video tutorials are coming in future. Thank you very much for watching.